what? Knew God. For although they knew God, they neither glorified Him as God nor gave thanks to Him. See, even the most pagan of unbelievers knows there's a God. Even because it says they even knew God, they just didn't recognize God. They didn't trust Him. They didn't glorify Him. It goes on, and if you back up a couple verses, in verse 19, it says this: since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. See, God has made Himself plain to everyone. So when somebody says, I'm an atheist, well, the fact is, that individual, if you can get down to brass tacks and talking to that individual, there is down deep somewhere in there a belief in a God. Now we know that God has revealed Himself, as we talked about last week, in a few different ways. One is in verse 20, for since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made. What are some of the ways God has revealed Himself? Generally, He's revealed Himself how? Through creation. Creation. He's revealed Himself also through the written what? Through the written Word. He's revealed Himself through numerous ways. Everybody has this deep sense within them that there is a God. I would call most people agnostic that say they're atheist. An agnostic is somebody who just isn't sure if there's a God. They're not sure. When you get to people and talk to people with atheists, it's good. I can never call somebody that because I think deep down there's this need for a sense of God. Okay? Well, what does the Bible, but those who refuse God, what does the Bible call them, or what does the Bible say about those who refuse God? Or who Psalm 14:1 says it real clearly. They're fools. The fool says in his heart, there's no God. They're fools. Well, here's what I want to do with you all in your small group. For just a few minutes, leaders, you'll lead out in this. I apologize, my flu is not allowing me to give you guys the information beforehand so you know what you're doing. So this is as much a surprise to you as it will be to your group. So enjoy the surprise. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to read another scenario for you that I want you to respond to this morning. Listen to this and then get yourself into this scenario and then figure out how you're going to respond to this individual. Here you go. While in a long line at Walmart, the person behind you becomes bored and agitated, and he decides to strike up a conversation with you. After some small talk, he immediately wants to go to his favorite topic of Democratic candidates for president. The conversation ultimately leads to God and to those nonsense Christian conservatives. Now, just based on his negative dialogue, the guy is obviously not a Christian and truly has really no fear or belief in God. Okay? However, consistently he keeps referring to himself throughout the conversation as a Christian. Well, the line is still long. It seems to have grown even longer since when you first began the discussion. But suddenly, he wants to talk to you about your Christian conservative beliefs. Now's your chance. He's interested in knowing where you stand. Here's your question. What will be the first thing you'll talk about to him about or concerning what it means to be a Christian? What's the first place you're going to go with this guy? It's obviously come out that you're one of those Christian conservatives. He wants to know why you're a Christian. He didn't really believe in God, so he says, although he calls himself a Christian. He's been down the road with one of these guys before. Where do you begin with it? Where's the first place, the first thing you'll talk about concerning what it means to be a Christian? I'll give you guys 5 minutes. When I say 1 minute, we'll give you 1 minute to wrap up, okay? Where do you start? Where do you start with a guy like this? your uncle, he could be your grandfather, he could be anyone, he could be anybody. And we got to know where to start with guys like this. Well, the Bible tells us where we need to start with guys like this. And it's in Hebrews chapter 11. It says this, without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he what? Exists. Here's the problem. If a guy says he doesn't believe in God, it's going to be very difficult to explain to him who Jesus is. Because we can't really come to an understanding of who Jesus is until we come into an understanding of who God is. You got to believe God exists before you can please him. And that's the starting point, really, with anybody who doesn't believe in God, which is why we believe God exists. It's the key crutch in our understanding of salvation, of every doctrine that we believe. God exists. And he rewards those who earnestly seek him. Okay? Now there's a lot more we can talk about that going into this guy, because I'm sure you guys had some great dialogue about that. But that's the place we want to start. Now God not only exists, he exists as the one and only. The Bible states the message says, only one and true living God. The one and only one. This is the one point God is insistent upon. He will not let this go. He is the one and only one God. He is not one among many gods. Okay? Just so you know, he is not the greatest of all the other gods. As a matter of fact, there's a story in Scripture in the book of Daniel. Daniel was a dream interpreter. You remember Daniel very well. Daniel interpreted one of the king's dreams, King Nebuchadnezzar. Here was the problem. King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream nobody could interpret, and was just about to put to death every counselor in Babylon, including Daniel. And so one person stepped up and said, hey, this guy can interpret dreams. He brings Daniel in. And how did King Nebuchadnezzar know that Daniel gave him the right dream interpretation? Because he told him his dream without even knowing what his dream was. So Daniel tells him his dream and then gives him the interpretation of the dream. And King Nebuchadnezzar believed him. And here's what he said about Daniel. He said, surely your God is the God of gods. Now that statement is only partly true. But you see, in a society that's littered with gods, there's always room for one God to take over the others. Daniel's just happened to be the best God at the time. So he got first place. But I want you to know something about our God. See, we live in a culture, believe it or not, we're not far from Babylon. We're a culture filled with idols and gods. People love their gods. Most of their gods are who they think is God. It's not the God of the Bible. But our culture is filled with gods, love their gods. I want you to know something. Our God is not the God of gods. He is the only God. And he made that very, very clear. He tells us in Isaiah 45, I am the Lord, there is no other. Apart from me, there's no God. Matter of fact, he begins with the Israelites and their commandments with the first commandment, you shall have no other gods besides me. I am not the God of gods. That's what he said. I am the only God you've got. Okay? So that needs to be stated clearly. God is the one and the only God. Now, I got an assignment. Actually, I thought this one up this week. Didn't have any video to play this week to kind of fit along with this. So I thought of coming up with a competition. Here we got 11 groups in here. Let's see which one of you is better. Okay? Here's your competition, guys. I'm going to give you a, just real briefly, here's the game, here's the rules. Alright? I'm going to assign 3 different verses. Okay? I'll bring it up here so you can read the game plan here. I'm going to assign 3 verses for 3 different people at your table to look up and read aloud. So you need to find 3 people with Bibles at your table who would be willing to read their passage